contributors. Welcome to today's session, this Leadership Live from me, Nathan Simmons, Senior Leadership Coach, Trainer and Consultant. Idea of these sessions is to give you, uncommon skills taught in uncommon ways that will get you incredible results. That's the plan from these sessions. 30 minutes of punchy, dynamic content that's going to help you take you and your leadership and your conversations to whole new levels, not just in the workplace, but also at home, because we are leaders categorically 100% of the time. We just have to tune into this thing that we do. And that stuff starts internally with the dialogue we have with ourselves and our families, our communities, as well as our teams. Today, we are covering feedback, and we're going to be talking about feedback that gets results. How many people here, yes or no, in the chat boxes, have given someone feedback on the same thing at least once, twice, 3 times, and you're still getting the same result, or that person defaults to what they were telling you they weren't going to do or what they were going to change, and they go back to doing what they said they were going to, or said they weren't going to do? I see this time and time again. We give them, we go and give the information, and they're like, yeah. And then you turn around and walk off, and they're like, no. And it's just like, why? But it's human behavior. So we have to start looking at some ways we break down how we deliver the feedback, and that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at how we prepare ourselves to give feedback. We're going to look at the structure that we use to deliver that feedback, and then we're going to look at the way to make sure, or actually we're going to be looking at the way we trip ourselves up that stops us from having the conversations in the first place. But then when we shift that perspective, that's going to enable us to, or actually encourage us and empower us to have that conversation more of the time. So we're going to cover these 3 key elements when we're looking at feedback today. Let's do the housekeeping though before we get into this. Has everyone got their mobile phones with them? Let's make sure, get their mobile phone, get the little aeroplane lit up, okay? Zero out the distraction, 100% attention on you, what you're doing here and what you're here to learn. Any apps, any email, get them closed down now so you can be fully present, to make sure you're in this space. Number 2, other than a cup of tea, make sure you've got a fresh page for fresh thinking. Declutter them, make sure you've got, a decluttered space so you can get your thoughts down there, whether it's notes, doodles, key points, whatever, get them into that space that you can go back and reread them. Because it's really important that you can go back to that information, reread it, reignite the thinking, and start resourcing the experiences you've had before this moment and in this moment with these ideas and concepts. It's really important we get that down. If, and the last bit of housekeeping before we get into the core content, if you have not registered for next week's session in the LinkedIn events page, the link is going to come up in the chat box in just a second. Next week's content, absolutely necessary. I cannot give this enough importance and significance. What we're going to be covering next week, which leads on nicely from the feedback of what we're doing now, is talking about mental health conversations and how we as leaders have mental health conversations, and more to the point, how we don't have them. Because, as an educated guess, 90 to 95% of leaders are actually nervous about having that conversation with someone in their team. That they're worried that if they do say something, they're going to make the situation worse rather than make it better. And the truth is, the fact that we say nothing, that's the thing that makes it worse. That's the bit that causes the damage. So next week, we're going to be covering a beautiful 4-step model and concept that's going to help us as leaders, as human beings, engage in a conversation in a completely different way, so that we can actually start doing that, and we can start talking to the people in the right way and use the right questions that are going to trigger the right reactions and responses for that person to go and do their healing for themselves, not for us to do it for them, because that's not what we're here for. We're not qualified counselors or therapists. We're here as leaders, and it is by our role modeling and our example and our focus, it helps those individuals to take that action. So I'm looking forward to that. If you haven't registered, the link's there. Take the link, go and register. Good. Feedback. Let's dive in now. Feedback. The first thing, and this is a repetition, I say this a lot in a lot of my trainings, but it's so vital, and it's so vital because so few people are deeply aware of this, and if they do hear it, they occasionally need reminding along the journey. The one thing that stops feedback from landing, this is the first thing, is this key mantra. And I've said it to you before, those people who have been in this room before, and I'll say it again. I learned this a few years ago, and I wish I'd learned this at 16. And my life may have been very different in the way that I was interacting and relating with people. I truly hope so. It's not guaranteed, I hope so. The one thing that stops us from, or stops people from hearing feedback, is what we're already thinking. What we think of people is how we treat them. I've said it before. Some of you, if you've heard me say this before, please put a yes in the chat box right now. If you haven't, please put a no. Yes, no, yes, good, 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 good. And for those people that have only just met me, how many times have you heard me say this in the last, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months? This is absolutely critical for making sure that we get this right. Because as leaders, it is about the people, and it's about the power that we help them to see in themselves. It actually comes from the idea of empowering. Here's the beauty of the word to empower. You cannot empower anyone. This is the truth. Why? Because actually when you break down the language, the word empower, it means in power. You cannot put power into somebody else. They have to do that for themselves. But the moment you start thinking that, well, the moment I think you're an idiot, how do I treat you? Put it in the chat box. If I think you're an idiot, how do I treat you? And I choose my words carefully and don't make them too crass for a live training. Like an idiot, exactly. So if I come into a feedback session and I want to give you feedback, but I already think you're an idiot, what's going to happen to my choice of words? What's going to happen to my physiology? What's going to happen to the feeling that you're going to get as a result of that feedback? Because if I'm already thinking you're an idiot, why would I use words that are going to support you or stop you from being an idiot? I'm not, because the human brain is a validation machine. So the moment that I think something of someone, I'm now looking for reasons to validate what I'm now thinking to make myself right and safe. It's human evolution. I start looking for those things that I'm starting to label the individual with. But the problem with this is if I'm treating you like an idiot, and my words that are coming out are actually starting to support that validation, how do you start acting? How do you start acting? Let me see it in the chat box. Let's see what comes up. I know this is foundational stuff, but it's really important. Really important we start to understand how we enter a conversation. Negative. The phrase that I learned another, I think it was a couple of years before I learned what you think of people. So it's about managing your shadow. And what he meant by this is when people are sitting in a meeting room waiting for you to arrive, how do they feel before you enter the room? What sort of shadow are you actually casting before you get there? And then when you leave that room, what sort of shadow are you leaving behind you that's causing certain behaviors in that meeting room? And how many times have you phoned up your customer service, you've spoken to someone there, and you can hear them reading off the script that they need to know, they need to tell you something, so they're reading off the script. But in English, no, we talk about, no, but you know they're telling you the right thing, but you know deep down that they're mugging you off. We've all had this experience. How many times have you been sat in a meeting room waiting for someone to turn up and you're thinking, shit, I've got a meeting with Bob today. I really don't want to have that meeting. Why? Because Bob treats me like an ass. How many people have had that experience? Yes or no? And I'm not saying everyone called Bob is a nasty person. I just use that because it's just an easy. If anyone here knows someone called Bob and they're nice, I'm sorry, you know. But this is, but let's not remember that we're not exempt from this. This is the truth. So what we're projecting out, other people are picking up on it. It's not science fiction, it's science fact. That's a different webinar altogether. We get into neuroscience and how many neurons your heart actually contains and electrical fields. So it's important. The first thing we have to understand is what you think of people is how you treat them. The second part of this you need to understand is what you think of people isn't actually true, because you're making it up in your own head based on a snapshot of time or an incident that actually happened. And then you see that moment and your opinion changes or backs up an assumption that you're making. So you then use that moment to go and tell that person what you think of them to validate your feelings or sentiments about that situation or that individual. So it's really important that we understand. How many people have heard the phrase perception is reality? Anyone heard this phrase? Yes or no? I have. Good. Yes, yes, good. This is the linchpin in that. Perception is reality. It's a lie. Your perception is your reality. You try telling someone who's colorblind what the difference is between green and red. And let me know how long that argument lasts, because it doesn't matter how long you stay in that conversation, they're not able to see that stuff. They're not able to see a differentiation. Their perception is completely different to yours. So remember, when you see a person interacting in a moment, it's a snapshot of time. You have a choice how you want to respond or how you react. And remember, it's your responsibility to go into that dialogue as a leader to help lead that person. And your responsibility is exactly that. It's your ability to respond to a situation. Not to go in there and react and cause an unnecessary problem, or to degrade or depreciate an individual. It's not how life works. Hope this makes sense. Yes or no? Is everyone with me? Yes? No? Good, 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 good. So what you think is number one. Number two, I want to give you the framework. So let's look at the framework of how we start to build this. I'm giving you the foundational structures of this. There are some other layers, but as always, I thought I wasn't going to overrun today, but I might just overrun by a few minutes. The first thing we want to do is we want to separate the individual from the situation. It's really important we understand this. Just because someone's done something wrong, does that necessarily make them a bad person? Yes or no? If a person turns up late for work, are they a bad human being? No, they probably just missed the bus. Something happened. Often when we see kind of these behaviors that are repeated over time, actually there's something else going on. It's our responsibility as leaders to have a deeper conversation to find out what is happening for them. Because there's a challenging or low quality of thinking that's causing a situation to occur, and we need to get to the heart of that so we can have some conversation, and that requires how we deliver our feedback. So the first thing we want to do is separate the two things. We separate the person from the situation. We separate the person from the behavior. Prime example, I just had a conversation with my daughter. I love you, I don't love the behavior. That was a conversation I just had 20 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago. Categorically, I'm biased. She's my daughter. She has been for nearly 8 years. I love her dearly. There are some, does that stop me from loving her? No. Or whatever the behavior was, no. I love you, I don't love the behavior. And we can use this sort of language when we're working as well. Now, you don't have to tell people at work you love them, because that may end up in a conversation with HR. Let's be frank about this. But I really appreciate what you do, or I have a lot of respect for the way you work. I don't appreciate this kind of behavior, this kind of activity. So we separate the two things. What we want to talk about is we want to talk about the action. So your A stands for action. So we want to talk about the thing. We need to have a conversation about the lateness. Need to have a conversation about the choice of behavior or the choice of language in that phone call. So I'm separating the two things. So I'm not talking about or saying, well, why are you late? What's wrong with your phone call? I remove the you and the your from it as much as possible. And I want to talk about the lateness. So by creating the objectivity and the distance, I then create a third object. So it's no different to Claudio and me talking about the pen. Claudio, is it okay that we have a conversation about the pen? Claudio goes, of course it is. And Claudio's not even in a feedback session with me. But we create the space and the objectivity to talk about the thing so that the person feels a bit more comfortable to talk about it. So what we want to do is we objectify the thing that we want to discuss. So we talk about the thing, the lateness, the conversation. Personal favorite of mine, the current level of personal hygiene, the conversation that no one ever wants to have with a member of their team at any point in their career. But trust me, having a conversation about the current level of personal hygiene in comparison to you stink, okay, is a very different, very much more heartfelt conversation. And crikey, when I did that conversation, I felt nervous as hell having that because it is such a personal thing. So it's being mindful and using this framework, it just creates enough to give you a little bit of leverage to put yourself in the conversation because you know it needs to happen. Number 2, your I in A stands for impact. So now we've got started the conversation, and lateness is the easiest one. We need to have a conversation about the lateness. And then we can say, well, what's the impact of the lateness on the team? What's the impact of the lateness on the client? What's the impact of the lateness on the business? And again, what I'm doing is asking lots of questions because I want them to tell me all the answers. Said it before, say it again. Who here likes being told what to do? Feel free to put me, no, whatever you want to do in the chat box. Who here likes being told what to do? Not really. Good. Correct answer. Never. No. Good. Interesting thing though, as I'll repeat again, no one likes being told what to do unless it's them telling themselves. Who here's had an argument with their dad when they were 14, when their dad was telling them to do something and you knew he was right, but you refused to let him be right because you were 14 and you knew better than him and he was 45 and definitely didn't know anything about the world. Been there, done, absolutely. So we ask lots of questions to get them to give us more information. So what's the impact of the on the? So we're using lots of the. We're keeping that distance and that space because we want them to tell me, oh, it means the customer's got to wait. Oh, it means the team's got to do more work. Oh, it means the business might get a fine if we get lots of complaints and we can't handle them. Oh, okay. So the person is now giving you lots of information of how their behavior, their action is potentially causing a problem to different elements of your business. And who's telling them this? Them. That's the beauty of doing it this way around. Last part though, because what we want to do is we want to make sure we're giving that third object back because it's all been separated from here. We're talking about the pen, but it's not my pen really, even though in their brain they're answering the questions for you. The last one here is desired impact, desired outcome, sorry. So at this point, we want to then take that object, that third item, and then bring it in and give it back to them. And how we do it is this way. So based on, and we use very clear language, so follow me on this. Based on everything that you've just told me, what would you like to do differently to improve this situation? Let me say that again. Based on everything that you have just told me, what would you like to do differently to improve this situation? So we see how this is changing the dynamic. I'm actually reinforcing the fact that they have just told me. I'm not telling them anything. Why? Because they don't like it. It's human behavior. They're telling me, oh, so fantastic. You've told me all this information. You've shown me your business aware. You're showing me your client savvy and customer centric and all that wonderful stuff. Less early starts, please. Maybe. Depends where you are in the world. So based on everything that you've just told me, what would you like to do to improve this situation? Fantastic. And the person says, oh, I'll set 2 alarm clocks and I'll make sure that I don't go out drinking on a Friday night and so on and so forth. You're like, fantastic. This is amazing. They're telling you everything they're going to do. It's their actions, their implementation, their responsibility. If they keep being late or whatever it is they're doing, am I going to be there to wake them up in the morning with a cup of tea and a bacon sandwich? No, because I'll be too busy eating my own bacon and eggs, okay? In the nicest possible way. It's not my responsibility to wake up everybody in my team to make sure they're at work on time. Who here at some point in their career had a member of staff that was being, or a member of their team being late, and they used to kind of try and give them an early morning call to help them wake up? Has anyone done that? I definitely have. Yuna's not shaking her head, lucky you. I've done it. It doesn't work because eventually they just turn their phone off and they ignore you anyway. So there's me getting up bright and early to make sure everyone else can get to work, and then they're not even paying attention because it's not them, it's me forcing the behavior on them, and I'm not getting to the depth of the understanding. Hope this is useful. Quick spin. What's been useful so far from the first two elements of what we've covered? What's been useful? Before I hit the last key point. Also evaluate the progress. Yes, I'll talk about that in just a second. Objectify the issue. Beautiful. The action. Good. Personal action. Absolutely. Focus on the action and the outcome. Good. Good, 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 good. We're not saying, most people, if you've got someone who's turned up at 5 minutes past 9 and you say to them, okay, so we need to have a conversation. What do you think this conversation is going to be about? Most of the people, 98% of the world will say, oh yeah, I'm late. I'm really sorry. Let's have a conversation about this. Or they'll even turn around and say, need to have a conversation about the lateness. And even by doing that, that person knows they're late. They know the standard deep down. There's a different layer we can get into in bigger conversations. It's not you're separating or ignoring it. They will buy into it anyway. But it's about making sure that we go through this and we get to here. Some people will be difficult. Some people will be challenging. I don't know what you're talking about. So we just have to use some clever questions to help them realize that. Say, well, okay, what's the company expectation for start times? Oh, it's 10 to 9. Okay, so what's the time now? Oh, it's 5 past 9. And what was the arrival time today? Oh, it's 5 past 9. Okay, so what's the conversation about? About me being late. Oh, okay, good. But if they still want to play that game, it's a different conversation. It's not really about lateness. It's actually more about crikey, being difficult and obtuse and all those wonderful words where they're just trying to flex their muscles and push boundaries, and you now need to put your boundaries back in place. It's really important we see this. This model is the foundation to make this happen. Create objectivity. Talk about the behavior and the action, not the individual. So you can get to the heart. One of the key things to making this really work is seek first to understand before making yourself understood. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R. Covey. But if I think I'm right, what does that make you? If I'm right, what does that make you? Wrong. Because it means I'm automatically positioning myself in the conversation as that. So everything that I start to do is going to be trying to validate that you're wrong in the first place. So it's important that when we're doing this, we're asking lots of questions because we want information. And I've done it before, and I had an individual that was being repeatedly late. He was late again on the 5th day, even though I'd had conversation. And when I took him to task, because I was so sick and tired of the lateness, he then tells me after 20 minutes of me being very, very unhappy in the situation that his dog had just died and he'd been up all night. So it's really important that even though we may get these repeat occurrences, that actually we take each one for what it is. We ask questions and get the information. It's really important we do this, because if we suddenly jump in with both barrels, actually we're jumping in with both feet and we're going to cause ourselves a problem. Everyone good with that as an idea? Ask lots of questions. How do we make sure we're following up on this? This is the important part. If you need to give someone feedback or have a conversation with them that may be about something so-called or negative, or you're not sure how that person's going to respond, what's the common name that we give for these types of conversations? And if you know the answers, put them in the chat box. If you've got other opinions about what common names that we give to feedback conversations, put them in the chat box now, because we need to shift some dynamic on this. What are the common names for feedback when we maybe don't want to give the feedback? Unbiased, we can try an unbiased one. Unfortunately, most of us are fairly biased. We have confirmation biases, we have preferences, etc. And we're always kind of conflicted with these things. Got sensitive conversations, good. Impartial, nice. How many people here have had to have a difficult conversation with someone? How many people have had, oh, I need to have a difficult conversation with Bob. Bob always gets a hard time. How many people? Good. I need to have a difficult conversation. So what we say in that conversation is going to actually be. So if what we think of people is how we treat them, and I think you're an idiot, how do I treat you? Like an idiot. But if I think I'm going to have a difficult conversation with Neil today, thanks for being the center of attention on this one, Neil. What do I think how do I think that conversation is going to go? What do I actually think of Neil in this situation? That he's going to be difficult, that the conversation is going to be difficult, the outcome is going to be difficult. And if I think a situation is difficult, what is it I start doing then, potentially in my own head, because of that? I've got prejudgment. Absolutely. How many people have said, oh, I've got to have a difficult conversation with so-and-so today? Oh, what time do they start? Oh, they start at 10 o'clock. Okay, great. Well, I've already got this to do and this to do and this to do. So I'm going to go over there and do that stuff over there. And then all of a sudden it's 3 o'clock and you're like, oh, how did that happen? I'm finishing in 60 minutes. I haven't got time to have that conversation with that person. Oh, well, do you know what? What I have done is this, and this. So I've validated my day at work, and what I've actually done is avoid having that difficult conversation with said individual. How many people have done that in their time? I'm not saying we do it all the time. I've done it, yes or no? Yes, guilty, good. Why? Because what you think of a person is how you treat them, but what you think of a situation is what it becomes. So the moment you start attaching labels and start attaching emotions to a situation, it starts to play out in your head, and you again start to look for validation as to that thing that you're thinking in your head, to seek kind of rightness and approval, and to make sure you're validating where you're going. But if you're giving someone information that is helping them to do a better job, in fact, maybe even keep their job, what other names could you give to that conversation right now that would make you have that conversation? Give me some suggestions in the chat box. Give me some suggestions about different names that you can give to feedback that is helping people do a better job. And if you can hear the banging, that's my neighbor doing DIY. It's not someone trying to get into the ring. Okay, just saying. Essential to grow. Good. Productive. Good. Positive. Good. Whatever name you want to give to that conversation, you need to make sure you're attaching it before you have the conversation. For me, it's about necessary conversations. The more necessary that the more critical the thing is that happened, the more necessary it becomes to make sure it happens. Because if we start going into avoidance or prejudgment or thinking that person's an idiot, we're not going to make that conversation happen. It just won't. We'll find something else that is more engaging and more interesting for our brain to get involved in, rather than dealing with that other stuff. So it's really important that we do this. So the first thing is what you think of people is how you treat them. The second is use the framework, create your objectivity, ask more questions, seek first to understand before you're making yourself understood. And then the third part is making sure that you're applying the appropriate label that's going to get you to take action every single time on that conversation that needs to happen. I hope this is useful, these 3 key elements we're covering today. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, 10 being awesome. How useful was today? Let me know. And if you didn't like it and you thought it was crap, please say so in the chat box so I can help improve it for next time, okay? I'm also very comfortable with your feedback because it helps me to become more incredible than yesterday, all right? Good. Amazing. Love it. What's the one thing, good top up, man, I'm glad you're here for this, brief refresh to keep the thinking going. Grand. What's the one thing you're taking away from this session that's going to help you be a better leader from now? One thing in the chat box. Let me know what you're taking away. And while you're doing this, so a couple of things that come up in my thinking just before we get to the free gift from this session. I forget to say that there is a free gift for being here in the live. This is only for the people in the live. It doesn't happen for the people on YouTube or watching the replay, okay? This is, there is a gift for you to take away at the end of this. I've done an infographic of this so you can keep it there in your memory banks. Accountable for my behavior, good. Objectify the issue, nice. Prepare turns of phrase and feedback conversation, nice, good. There's good stuff coming up here. Couple of ways to work with me. So we're wrapping up this session. I'm going to give you some key dates and stuff that's going on, a couple of things that are coming up. One is, if you would like to work with me, there's 2 ways that you can work with me further from here if you would like. One, I've got the Grow Coaching model on Udemy. So it's a 2.5-hour coaching course there, video content, taking you through each of the elements of the Grow Coaching model in a very different way, from a very different viewpoint. Okay, some of the key elements that I've learned over the 9-10 years of leadership and personal development I've done, and the 23 years of leadership experience I've got, and I've condensed it in there as well. Just had a message come through that the link that I provided is wrong, so I'm going to get the link for you in just a second. But there is the Grow Coaching model there on the Udemy link, so the link for that is going to come up in just a second. I've got you the best possible price I can do at this point in time. Okay, I think it's around about 50%. It's there. The other option, next week I am starting a 4-week mini series. I had the advert up at the beginning of the session. It's all about the self-leadership model. I covered this last week. You can grab that on YouTube if you want to see the replay there of what we covered, very high level. But this is going to be a 4-week deep dive. It's 4 90 to 120 minute sessions once a week for 4 weeks, and we are going to go in on your leadership skills, in on your leadership style, and it is going to challenge you, frustrate you, and also ignite you. Okay, we're going to be looking at some of those deep questions. We're going to be looking at some of those core skills and tools that are required to really do the deep dive internally and put yourself under the microscope. Put your goals in the telescope so you can put your sights on where you're going, and really plan that route and how you're going to make it sure it happens, and then put the tactics and habits in place to really bring it to life. So we're going to do that over 4 weeks. If you wish to speak to me about the Self-Leadership 4-week mini series, there's going to be a link for my online calendar. Please click through. Let's have a conversation. You have 30 minutes to talk about your leadership. I'm going to add as much value as I can to you in that 30 minutes. And if it's right for you and you want to join that leadership course, please do. You'll be very welcome to. The other thing that I will say in support of that, I didn't give myself a lot of lead time to advertise the 4-week mini course. It is going to be very intimate. It's going to be very small. So if you want to get that focus and attention for the 4 weeks, now is the time to take the opportunity to do that. So I hope that resonates with some of you after seeing this content today. I want to take and help take your leadership to a new level. There's the link for the infographic. Please copy and paste that. Please click through. If you've already subscribed, that's absolutely fine. Subscribe again. You shouldn't get 15 different emails or 15 of the same email every week. It should just be one. But this is the opportunity to download that infographic for this model, so you've got that handy for when you're preparing for your conversations in the future. Okay, I hope. I'm even going to click it myself just to make sure it works. Yes. Yes, it does. I got really excited then. Sorry, apologies. I didn't mean to. Good. Infographic. That's your free gift. Please take that away. If you wish to work with me, if you wish to book an appointment, the links are there. Let's please have a conversation. And finally, if you're watching this on the replay and you're watching this in YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe so you can get up to date, keep up to date with all the new content that's coming through. Wow. Any cost for MailChimp thing? No, the MailChimp thing is free. Like the infographic, please, no charge for the mail. Any of the sessions that you attend here, if there is a MailChimp link for something to download, that it's free. Go and get it. Next week, I'm already building next week. It's going to be 100 questions for mental health conversations. It's going to be a really useful piece of information to help leaders having the right conversation. So I'm still building that right now. Wow, I'm actually on time. I'll give myself 40 minutes for this, and I've got 30 seconds to spare. 30 minutes goes so fast. You're right, it does. Everybody, massive thank you for being here. So very appreciative of you taking your time to invest it in this conversation. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate this. Hope it's been useful. Please do me a favor, join next week's session. Please put comments in the event page, what you enjoyed, what was useful, what you've taken away from it, what people missed, to encourage them to come next week. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks very much, everyone.